Hello, everyone. Welcome in. As I talked about in my last video, we will now go through Kris Sperry, the medical expert on Alexee Trevizo's witness list, with his testimony in another case. Now, this case is also an extremely sensitive and sad subject of child abuse and ultimately the death of the child. You will be hearing some testimony about a chicken nugget and choking. That is the defense of these defendants, that the injuries sustained to the child were because this mom was trying to get a chicken nugget dislodged and the child was choking on the chicken nugget. It sounds silly or crazy maybe in a weird way, but it's actually a pretty bad defense and kind of sinister, so it's interesting. Now, one thing that I did find interesting about Dr. Kris Sperry real quick is here's where some of his credentials are from. New Mexico. Interesting. Also, if you're inclined and haven't already seen my video about him, pause to read. This is some of the clips from the article exposing why he retired in embarrassment. Now, his job as a medical expert is to cause reasonable doubt and give alternative explanations as to the findings in the autopsy, right? As we just went through the autopsy and saw so many different indicators of life, breathing, and suffocation to some degree, he is going to have a very hard job causing reasonable doubt and providing alternative explanations. If he's not able to disprove the fact that the baby was breathing, essentially the whole argument that they are left with on the defense is that the baby breathed, but not in front of Alexee. She didn't see that because they're trying to take away the intent in the murder charge. So he has a very high bar, a high task to do in this case. Now, you'll see in the Rosenbaum trial, he gets caught up. Why? Because he has to agree with the findings. He can't disagree with the findings. But somehow magically he disagrees with the conclusion. Again, trying to find reasonable doubt and offer an alternative explanation as to the findings, because it's very rare that the findings of the autopsy are invalid. We do have a different type of autopsy done in New Mexico. I also did a video on that. It does seem that because of a large religious portion of New Mexico's voter base not wanting to agree to autopsies and people being reluctant to agree to autopsies for themselves and or their loved ones due to religious beliefs, it was decided, in the interest of justice, because autopsies need to get done, a happy medium was found by doing most of the work of the autopsy through CT, MRI scanning, and only having to do, actual sampling of body matter and material when necessary. Okay, so that's kind of what we're dealing with there. It seems to hold up in court, but it does give a little bit of room for Kris Sperry to try and say, this isn't usual, this isn't right. But I have mentioned before that if the people of New Mexico accept this, then it's already a barrier, right? That's already a barrier for him to get over. So if they're already accepting that this is how we do autopsies here, we accept these autopsies, we don't like under the knife autopsies, then you're going to have to disprove it on facts. We went through it and we saw that there are a lot of facts that from different aspects of the body, different medical presentations that happened in baby Alex that prove that he had oxygen and was deprived oxygen. So like I said just a minute ago, if he's not able to disprove that, then the burden on the defense is extremely high to convince the jury that the baby did breathe, but not in front of Alexee. So with that being said, let me cue up this video. So we will be skipping around. This is his first introduction in court. He quickly gets off of the stand and then comes back. So we will jump around. Not everything is extremely pertinent, but I would like you to get a feel of the prosecutor in this case dismantling Kris Sperry and one other note before we start. I hope I'm not assuming this. I don't know for certain, but I do believe he has Tourette syndrome. We're not making fun of him for Tourette's. We're not commenting on the fact that he has Tourette syndrome, but without disparaging anyone, I can say that is an extremely unfortunate medical issue to have when you are an expert witness in very stressful situations all the time, because from what I can see, the Tourette's will present when under stress, which unfortunately for Kris Sperry, in my opinion, will lead people to think that he's being untruthful when he's showing signs of stress. You're not really under stress if all your facts check out and you're not trying to convince someone, right? So, not that his Tourette's acting up can be used against him that much, but it's the jury's call as to what they believe from any witnesses. And so, with that being said, we're not making fun of his Tourette's, but we can acknowledge the fact when his tics start kind of getting out there, and then by that I mean he has a lot of blinks. You'll see these very rapid blinks and stuff like that. Much different than just someone under stress blinks. This is you'll see that he definitely, in my opinion, has Tourette's or something like that. And so we're not making fun of that, but we are acknowledging the fact that it acts up. Whatever he's exhibiting there acts up when the pressure is put on. So let's check it out. If it skips around, that's because I'm trying to clip out parts that aren't important.
Raise your right hand, please. You solemnly swear affirm testimony about to give this matter, the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
State your true and correct name.
Sure. My name is Kris Lee Sperry. My first name is spelled K-R-I-S.
And your last name is spelled?
Sperry.
I don't know if we need to spend a lot of time on credentials. It's not relevant to our story.
You want to start?
Yes.
Dr. Sperry, when did you decide to provide that you were going to use these pictures of slides in your testimony? When did you make that decision?
Yesterday morning.
And what caused you to make that decision? Had anything changed since the first time you had looked at had there been anything intervening that caused you yesterday, as opposed to any other day, to make these pictures?
Well, I thought it was necessary, or it would be useful, I think, to show the difference between the state of healing of the fracture in the right tibia bone, and also in the left ulna, that these were markedly different and in their microscopic changes of healing, which is not something that can be appreciated at all on the x-ray.
And was this as a result of hearing about Dr. Darasaw's testimony on the stand?
Yes.
And was this as a result of hearing about the Dr. Darasaw's position on non-union joints and the rate of healing in the ulna and the tibia?
Yes, basically that my understanding that this was stated that non-union fractures are very, very rare in children, which I agree, but it doesn't mean that they're impossible. And again, the microscopic features to me were so dramatic that I thought this would really provide visual understanding, excuse me, for the opinions that I was going to offer.
And was this as a direct result of what Dr. Darasaw, what was reported to you that Dr. Darasaw said?
Okay, so like I said, we're not making fun of his mannerisms or anything. It's strictly for observation purposes and to test his credibility. But these, if you haven't picked up on it yet, this is the issue with him entering these after the doctor's testimony is he had no clue what the actual medical examiner and or doctor's testimony that was going to be said was said, right? He may have had a slight indication, but if it went into different medical testimony, which really was a slam dunk for the state, at the last minute, he decided to produce this evidence for the defense, right? And that's always kind of an issue where he decided, oh, I want to use these because this doctor said this. Well, you're allowed to do that, but last minute is always an issue in court. This time it's kind of acceptable. So she's laying the foundation as to why they're getting to do this at the last minute. And you can kind of tell that, at least in my opinion, this is a last ditch effort. His reason for why he needed to put these out there, and they know that they're just playing low ball because he started blinking like crazy after he's like, yeah, then that's the reason why I wanted to put him out there. So we'll finish this little part of his, and then we'll get into the longer portion because he does get questioned real quick by on cross-examination.
Yes.
Did you feel that Dr. Derisaw's position was different than what you thought it had been?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I have at this time.
All right. Dr. Sperry, I want to talk about your opinion, though.
Sure.
You remember talking to me on the 14th, correct?
Yes.
We had a nice telephone conversation for about 45 minutes, right?
Yes, you were very nice at the time.
Am I not still?
So far.
So far?
So,
You anticipating that change?
one never knows. We're
Right.
just starting.
Has your opinion changed, though, regarding the non-union fracture? Did anything change about your opinion between when we talked on November 14th and as we sit here today?
No, I think actually you and I spoke about that. I told you, what my opinion was regarding the ulna fracture as compared with the tibia. And after we had a brief discussion, and that was about it.
Okay. And that was from looking at the slides that were provided to you by the defense, correct?
Correct.
All right. So nothing since July 14th, nothing has changed. Nothing that you heard about Dr. Derisaw's testimony. That didn't actually change your opinion in this case, correct?
Oh, no, not my opinions, no.
Okay. And were you told about Dr. Derisaw's testimony or did you watch it?
Oh, I've not watched anything at all. I mean, I understand that I was, at least witnesses were instructed not to, but I don't anyway. I don't watch these things on TV
All right. I don't blame you.
at all. Even whatever things that I've been involved in myself over the decades, I don't watch on TV.
All right.
So
Thank you, sir. That's all for now.
thank you.
What was it about Dr. Derisaw's, what was reported to you about what Dr. Derisaw said that made you feel like you needed to take these pictures?
Well, the non-union fractures were very, very rare in children, which, as I said, I agree, they are very rare, or with the terminology of something like almost unknown, but they exist. And actually there's a small body of literature addressing these, that they do exist. And the vast majority of time, non-union fractures, or I would say fractures that really exhibit very poor healing, are a clinical diagnosis where, say, a child, since we're talking about children, sustains a fracture of some bone, and then time goes by and it doesn't heal properly, but it's seen and understood and watched over the course of months by whatever orthopedic physicians are caring for the child. And so the fact that the fracture is not healing properly is recognized along the way. In this particular instance, where the first time that I know of that this fracture in the ulna was identified was really at the autopsy examination, is very unique. And there were sort of x-rays that were taken of the child as part of the skeletal survey where this was found. And then the sections of the bone were taken at the autopsy for examination. And, and appropriately, this is a good thing because all of these injuries, everything should be looked at microscopically if at all possible. And I mean, lo and behold, at least when I looked at the slides, there was a very radical difference, certainly between the tibia and the ulna. But the ulna alone, that fracture clearly shows significant evidence that it has been there a long time. I don't know how long, but it could be many months, and has just not healed.
Did Dr. Derisaw, was it reported to you that Dr. Derisaw said anything about the healing time, that she placed the injuries as occurring on a certain date?
As I recall, I think it was 3 to 4 weeks was the time frame that that I was told.
And you disagree with that,
Certainly with the ulnar fracture, yes.
and you wanted to show that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very quickly, nothing about your opinion, though, from July 14th changed based upon anything Dr. Darrisaw said, correct?
No, nothing about my opinion changed. I think, I told you what my opinion was, and I didn't think at that time that I would be taking photomicrographs, but at least from my own perspective, sometimes I have found it's easier, well, for everyone in the courtroom who's not a doctor to look at something and have me tell them what it is, and then they can make up their own mind.
Okay, I'm going to put this on 1.5 speed now that we have kind of, I think, as the body language experts would say, established a baseline for him. So when you see this on a little bit quicker speed, you will know that he's not blinking any crazier than normal or anything like that. Now I'm going to try and get. Now, feel free to laugh at some point. I'm pretty sure this is the part where he falls in his chair. I believe it is this part 2, not part 3. So I want to say pretty quickly into this, he will fall out of his chair. I will 100% be leaving that clip in. So let's get started.
I'm going to show you what I've marked as Defense Exhibit 143 to 165 and have you look at these pictures yourself and see if you can identify them generally for us.
Yes, these are all photographs of Layla Daniel, and it's a mixture of photos that were taken on, I believe, November 17th at the emergency room, and then on November 20th at the autopsy examination.
This time I will tender 143 to 165 into the record. Let's start out with the contention, was the child starved in any way?
No, I do not think there's any evidence of starving or malnutrition. No.
Did you consult Dr. Darrisaw's report, and were you aided in any way by that?
Well, yes, Dr. Darrisaw described her as to make sure well-developed and well-nourished, and I agree with that. The child basically looked fine as far as nutritional status was.
Now, let's talk about the bruising on the outside of Layla's body. I'm going to show you, if I may position on you. I'm going to show you Defense Exhibit 148, if you could have the lights. What are we seeing here?
Well, the scalp has been shaven, and there is distinct. Oh, okay. Sorry, that was jury. How was he doing? Let's have the jury step up.
It's so funny to me.
Are you okay? I'm not hurting anymore. All right, so yeah, I think I should be okay. Okay. Well, sorry about that.
Now, obviously, it is not funny for an expert witness to possibly disrupt the flow of the courtroom and have such a comical thing happen. But again, it's in the past, and these people have been convicted and are serving life sentences. So it's okay to laugh about it now. And it's definitely okay to laugh about the fact that this is Alexee's expert witness. So for all the people who say you're scared of her walking or anything like that, trust me when I say I don't think that this helps. I don't think she has the Avengers backing her here. Okay, that's just my opinion, but yeah.
Do you need me? I think I'm okay. Yeah. Let's bring the drink back. Nothing acutely hurt. Let's get started. Okay. Yes. Okay, we're ready to proceed. Try this again. All right. This is what number is this, man?
This is Number 148.
Okay, number 148 is a photograph of Layla's head at the autopsy after the scalp has been shaven. And there is, it looks to be a contusion or a bruise here, and another one here. This is on the back of the head. You can see the child's ears. And there's a little mark there that looks to be just an incidental a cut made during the process of shaving the scalp, which is something that occurs very frequently just in shaving the hair like this. But in and of itself, that doesn't, the cut doesn't mean anything. It's not an injury.
Is that, can you tell us how customarily at the GBI what is the utensil that's used to shave heads?
Yes, a scalpel. Really, it's just a regular curved scalpel, and it takes some practice. But this is how the head is typically shaved. It takes a little time, but again, with time and practice, it's easily done. But still, inadvertently, there can be just small cuts that are made on the scalp as a part of this process.
And you see a contusion on the top of the head.
Yes.
And what do you make of that?
Well, it's a bruise, and I believe that was, if I recall correctly, there was a microscopic section of that showed some evidence of inflammation. So this would mean it was somewhere, perhaps in the maybe 6 to 12 hour range, possibly more than that. I mean, I looked at the section myself, so it was not 2 or 3 or 4 days old, but it was also not very, very fresh either. There were some very early healing changes. And that was one of the few bruises that really exhibited any healing of the multiple ones that were seen on her body, and which also Dr. Derosa took sections from.
I'm going to show you what I marked as defendant's exhibit 158 and ask you if that gives you a better view of those scalpel marks.
Yes, it certainly does appear at the top. Those are just inadvertent cuts that are made on the scalp with the scalpel, and they don't mean anything. There is a little interrupted scrape here on the side of the head, and well, I think we'll talk more about this area here on the ear.
As normal, yes. And I'm going to show you 160, defendant's 160.
160 is the right side of the scalp. In fact, years ago before as well, which is a way to make it pop out and come loose. But one of the initial things to do if you think someone is choking on a piece of food, and you can tell that, and someone will come and kind of pound on your back to try to get there. It's harder to tell if that could readily come from a fingernail. Here, as you can see, again, 3 days later, it looks much bigger. It's, the characteristics of the contusions are less distinct. Here you can see individual marks that very readily could be fingers or even knuckles from, again, pounding on the child's chest, literally, without mincing words. What I appreciated was this was a repeated attempts to pound on the child's chest to remove this piece of chicken that was blocking her airway.
Is this the chest or the back?
Well, I'd say chest there. It's harder to tell if that could readily come from a fingernail. Here, as you can see, again, 3 days later, it looks much bigger. It's, the characteristics of the contusions are less distinct. Here you can see individual marks that very readily could be fingers or even knuckles from, again, pounding on the child's chest, literally, without mincing words. What I appreciated was this was a repeated attempts to pound on the child's chest to remove this piece of chicken that was blocking her airway.
Is this the chest or the back?
Well, I'd say chest generically. This is her back, of course, to pounding on the back, which is known and understood. I mean, that's something that is attempts are made to get something out of the air.
So I highlighted that part because, first off, he's excusing away a bunch of bruises on a kid's chest, saying that he's saying chest, saying that you would hit a kid's chest or whatever to get chicken out that they were choking on. Crazy, whatever. But the defense's attorney, like their own attorney, catches him messing up on accident and says, and now is that the chest or the back? Oh, it's the back. After he's just been talking about the chest for this whole time. It's just so comically bad to me. And so, yeah, we could keep going. But yeah, I just really wanted to highlight that part.
Now the compression of the front of the, as you would in trying to alleviate an airway obstruction in a child or in an adult, excuse me. If you use those same forces, you can inadvertently cause injury on the inside of a child's body just through that effort without knowing that this is happening.
Let me show you what I marked as defendant's exhibit 147 and tell us. Testing.
Oh, well, that could have been collected easily and frozen to be analyzed later. Chicken has specific DNA, so that would be very easy to do. Also, taking little pieces and looking at them under the microscope, you can tell what chicken looks like. The pathologist can tell what chicken looks like looking at it under the microscope, looking at little slices. So it could have been tested and analyzed very readily to identify it as being chicken. This wouldn't be very difficult to do. It'd be very simple. It's really a matter of collecting it and saving it and then the testing and analysis could be done, at leisure, really.
The injuries that you saw in this case would it surprise you if other medical trained people said they've never seen such injuries before for CPR or Heimlich maneuver?
It wouldn't surprise me in the sense that this is everything that
Come
we see in
on.
Layla, virtually everything, with a couple of exceptions of little bruises. Everything is recent. I mean, it happened very, very quickly. And the injuries are located in different places on the outside of her body and also specifically really on the inside of her body in very, very specific places. But in the context of sort of, I don't know, how would you say, a routine CPR or, resuscitative maneuvers carried out by trained people, then injuries can occur, but they're not common, not usual, but they still can occur even in the best of hands. But when one is looking at it from the perspective of an untrained person who is watching, who really does not know what to do or has the barest sense of what should be done, and is watching a child choke and realizing that whatever, that this is not getting better, then this escalates very dramatically. And so, yes, this amount of injury and the extent of the injury is very pronounced. But again, you have to look at the circumstances. One has to look, we as pathologists have to look at everything that's involved as well as just the injuries themselves. And when you approach it from that context, it's not surprising to me that the injuries are so excessive appearing because it was a life or death situation.
Doctor, we talked about Layla.
Yeah, for the child, you jerk. All right, now we're going to get into cross-examination. This prosecutor is awesome. Now, you've heard just kind of some of the ways that Kris Sperry explains things. He does not, in my opinion, well, I guess I don't even have to say in my opinion because these people were found guilty. He doesn't make his case well, and he doesn't explain any kind of smoking gun as to why these injuries don't lead to the fact that this person beat this child to death instead of trying to get this child to stop choking. So, with that being said, let's watch this prosecutor do his job to the fullest extent that is allowable by human power. Like he's a superpowered prosecutor.
He's asking for the month. Good afternoon, Dr. Sperry.
Good afternoon.
All right, so let's start off by finding some things that we can agree on. How about that?
We can try.
All right. Would you agree with me that people who are dead do not bruise?
People who are dead do not bruise?
Correct.
Generally, I mean, no, just for the most part, a beating heart and blood pressure is required at least for bruises to form. It's not universal, but in general, that's how we look at it.
In general, that's how you look at it. So all of the bruising that occurred to Layla happened while she still had a heartbeat.
I would say yes. So there was blood was being pushed through, her system, whether it was from her own heart or CPR. But yes, there was some blood pressure, a pressure wave. Yes.
So you think that the amount of bruising that we've seen today on Sarah's back could have come from CPR if she's dead?
Well, if she was, completely dead and her heart had stopped, if indeed at that point, CPR was being done, I would expect some slight hemorrhage, but probably not, at least, the extent of what we see here.
All right, so you wouldn't expect to see the extent of what we see here if she was already deceased, correct?
Correct. Not the extent. There could be some. I've seen varieties of it, but this is, to me, everything that I've seen pretty much tells me that her heart was beating to some degree.
And so you say that her heart was beating to some degree when the bruising occurred.
Well, yes. So,
Now, when the EMTs arrived, that they said that she had no pulse.
correct.
So would you agree that at that point she was dead?
I think for all intents and purposes, yes. No pulse was ever regained. So, I would say technically, she was dead at that point.
So would you agree with me then that none of the bruising would have been caused by any of the resuscitative methods that the EMTs undertook?
I think that's fair. There's a few small things that, like under the chin, there was a scrape, which I think Dr. Derisaw took, a piece of it found nothing. Certain things that could well have come from the resuscitation, but really didn't show anything microscopically, other than a few things scattered here and there, mostly around the face and the head. Most everything else, I would say, occurred prior to the time the EMTs were there.
Would you also agree with me that as the heart slows, the blood pressure drops?
Yes.
If the blood pressure drops, the extent of bruising also drops with that, correct?
That should be what happens. I mean, I'm not sure that's completely predictable all of that way, but as a general concept, that makes sense.
So you agree with me then?
Well, as a general concept, yeah. It's, again, everyone is different, and there's exceptions to everything. But as the blood pressure drops, again, the amount of blood being pushed through the blood vessels diminishes. Now, how that really affects the extent of bruising itself, that's much harder to say. Unfortunately, we can't ever conduct experiments to try this out.
Well, I agree because we can't kill people purposely, correct?
Yeah, no, it's considered. We don't do that in society.
Correct. We don't. That's against the law, right?
Yes.
Now, would you agree with me that kids can heal at different rates or different speeds than adults?
Oh, I mean,
That's a general matter.
in general?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, everyone is different, and children, especially because they're growing, their metabolic rate is a little bit higher, and so certain aspects of healing, potentially can be faster than adults. Certainly faster than significantly older people like me, as long as I don't fall off the thing anymore.
Mm-hmm. So kids, with that, yes, kids. There are certain things that kids heal faster. Correct.
Again, as a general concept, basically yes.
Okay. Bones being with them.
Bones, again, generally yes.
Now, can we also, are you familiar with the term a protected area of the body?
Yes.
And would the neck be considered a protected area of the body?
Potentially, especially the back of the neck or the upper high sides, places that on the neck that would not, say, be inadvertently injured from a fall or through plague, things like that.
How about this right here?
This right there?
Yeah.
I've never thought about the side of the neck as being a protected area because it depends on how, what it is that we're speaking about. I've just never, no one's ever asked me that before.
Okay, well, you're familiar with the research that shows that less than 0.2% of injuries to the neck are accidental.
I think that's reasonable. That's probably fair.
Okay, so then can we agree it's probably a pretty protected area if it's not getting routinely accidentally injured?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
How about the ears? Are the ears a protected area?
Generally, unless again, a child falls and strikes strikes the side of their head on something, and the ear happens to be in between. But ear injuries alone are fairly unusual.
They are fairly unusual, aren't they?
Yeah.
And in fact, there are certain telltale signs of things like pulling on an ear or slapping an ear. Correct?
Yes, there are sometimes injuries that can be seen that are fairly specific for those types of actions.
And called petechiae.
Well, petechiae are little pinpoint hemorrhages.
Mm-hmm.
They can come from impact injuries, superficial little bruises or asphyxia. I mean, they're not specific as far as what can cause them.
They're not specific. I'm sorry, you cut off there.
No, as far as for what can cause them. I mean, you can see petechiae in fairly minor bruises sometimes.
Showing states included 320. It's behind you.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
And I'm just going to point. I have a laser pointer, so I can point behind you. Don't worry, I won't do it in your eye. How about right here? Do you see those areas right there?
You're talking these here. I see this little discoloration. Yes.
Okay. Would you consider this to be petechiae?
No.
No, you wouldn't. Okay.
No, they're a little larger. Petechiae literally means pinpoint.
How about this one right here? It's kind of the same picture, same area of the different view.
Again, I mean, it looks like I can see these here and here. I would not call it petechiae just because it's a little larger.
But it's a bruise.
It may be. It possibly could be.
Okay. And to get a bruise right there, that would be consistent with, say, a slapping or pulling of the ear or some kind of trauma to the earlobe, correct?
It could be, yes.
Generally, you don't fall and he just hurt just your tiny little earlobe and not any other part of your face, correct?
Pretty much, yes.
Okay, so that's probably what that. So that would be consistent with the little bruises right here. Could be consistent with a pinching or pulling or slapping.
Yeah, your phraseology is right. It could be consistent with it. I don't have a problem with that.
How about the? I'm showing you stage 323, the back of her ear right here.
Oh, no, this right here.
Yeah.
I feel like this part is like really important because he is trying to explain away. He first off denies the petechia, which if you've ever had a bruise, I'm not a medical expert, but when it has a bunch of those little tiny red dots in it, that's kind of what that is. And so it's very obvious that it's a bruise when it gets that little petechia thing. And I guess the point that the part on the body that they're pointing to is an earlobe. And so, and there seems to be no other excuse, they're not freshly pierced or something like that for the earlobes to be having such a bruise. And I mean, my mom has pulled me by my ear when I was a kid once or twice, and it never left a bruise and it hurt. So, we deserved it probably whenever we got pulled by our ear a couple times, but it never bruised that I remember, and it still was like painful. So to pull or to bruise an earlobe would be pretty painful, pretty hard to do. And he just won't give in on that point, right? He's like, no, I don't know, not petechia. I can't tell. Maybe it is a bruise. No, it's not weird to have a bruise in that kind of spot. And so this is the type of medical testimony that we can possibly expect to see trying to disprove the autopsy in Alexee's case. Is this convincing? Comment if this is convincing or not to you so far, feeling like if this was the autopsy being discussed and you have someone who, is like MDJ, the person we saw in our video, who just seems upfront, honest, whether it's good or bad for our case, just telling us the truth, rather than someone like this who seems to be begging the question, avoiding it type of thing. Who are you going to believe more as a jury? And I am inclined to believe, because I have seen photos of the medical examiner. I'm not trying to throw her up or anything like that on here. I will be doing at some point when it gets closer to trial a breakdown of all of the witnesses and kind of like one of those family tree kind of things or one of those graphs to show who the witnesses are, what they're going to be talking about, everything like that, so that we can identify who they are and what's going on before they get called to the stand and mind our P's and Q's. But I can tell you that the medical examiner in this case seems to be presenting more like a nice young woman. So we will see, how that kind of dynamic plays out.
Yes, it looks to be a small bruise. Again, I wouldn't call it, it's too large for a petite.
Okay, and yeah,
But it looks to be a small bruise.
small bruise. Now, would you expect someone to say, I don't know, fall and hit the back of their ear just right there?
No, that would be unusual in and of itself without some, potentially some other, injury on the outer part of the ear as well.
So that could be consistent with, say, a slapping or a yanking of the ear.
Possibly, I don't know about the yanking particularly, but it could be, well, again, consistent possibly with an impact of some sort.
How about the armpits? Are the armpits the protective area of the body?
Yes,
If someone had an injury there, would that be an unusual place for them to have an injury?
it would be, yes.
Did you notice any injuries to your leg in the armpit area?
I don't recall offhand sitting here. If there are, you can show it. I just don't recall sitting here at this moment.
I'm going to show you stage 32. And see that this area right here kind of going into the armpit?
You talk about this here.
There's bruising over there too, but you also see this area right here.
Yeah, I mean, there's some here. This almost look like grip marks. The way the flash was taken to obscure some of this.
That's actually the light bulb, so I can.
I see. I see.
If you need to move it, just let me know. But
It's not the best picture. I mean, there's a lot of shadow down here. I honestly am not sure about exactly what that is because there's a great deal of shadow that's in this. And perhaps you have better views.
I do. Page 33. Do you see better here?
Somewhat, yeah. There's a discoloration there.
There's a discoloration. So
It looks like it.
and that's another protected area of the body, correct?
Well, it's really on the left upper front of the chest. I don't think it's quite gotten into the axilla yet.
But heading that way. That takes the.
Well, I don't know. Heading that way, it works.
How about the groin? The groin protected area of the body?
Generally, I would say yes.
And so you generally wouldn't expect to have children accidentally injuring their groin area, correct?
Yes, I would say you usually wouldn't. And if something like that were to happen, well, if the child's old enough, they should be able to tell you. It'd be something relatively memorable.
Now, did you look at the photographs of this child's groin area?
Yes.
Okay, and did that cause you any cause of concern?
Well, it's looking at them standing alone, without any other history or information. All the things we've been talking about earlier today. Could they be alone concerning? Sure. Could they be part of, the frenetic resuscitative attempts? Sure.
And what part of the resuscitative attempt would involve the child's labia majora?
The labia majora. I don't, at what point during when Ms. Rosenbaum was trying to do what she was doing and moving the child around, and moving her hands, I can't tell you exactly where her hands were every single moment or every part of the sequence. I'm not sure that she knows specifically.
But you think?
So I feel like that was a really damning moment for the defense. If you didn't catch that and you're not well versed in the female anatomy, the prosecutor asks, so what part of resuscitation attempts, meaning CPR, involves the labia majora? There was obviously some kind of damage to that area, some kind of issue going on as to why is there an injury there? I don't know the specifics of what type of injury it is, but I feel like that is just so bad for the defense. I don't know how bad your kid could be choking that you beat them to death, right? That just seems so crazy and backwards to logic. You're obviously trying to save your kid's life. I don't understand how you could beat them to death when you're trying to save their life. That just literally doesn't make sense. Even with panicking, I don't know. That just doesn't make sense to me. From there, seems a little bit like the type of defenses that are going to have to be called up in the Alexee Trevizo case, because it's like, why put the baby in the bag when there's help out there? Well, there's not a lot of reason to explain why you do that, and there's not a lot of reason to explain beating a child to death who's supposedly choking. Worst case scenario, wouldn't you just put your finger down their throat? Isn't that what you're supposed to do with babies anyways and children? You're supposed to get it out with your finger, and that's why, you know, infant parents, like moms, aren't supposed to have long nails. I've always heard something about that. So I've just never really heard that you beat the kid when they're choking.
You think that the injuries that we see on the child's labia majora are consistent with? I'm showing you the pictures there. Okay, no. Do you think that's consistent with the history that you've been given?
Well, in and of itself, I mean, when I see, I mean, there's a little linear something in through here. You know,
Well, and I think that's important, right? The direction in which a bruise occurs. Is that correct?
the direction.
We talked a little. You talked a little bit about pattern, right? How you get the bruise where you hit part of the body. Is that correct?
You get the bruise. I'm sorry.
In the area where you hit the body.
Oh, okay. I
So
mean,
if
there's some transference. If you, okay.
Right.
I
So if I
mean,
hit right here,
Yeah,
if I hit my arm against it right here, like this, would you expect my bruise would go down my arm like this?
that's reasonable. Yes.
So explain to me how these vertical injuries that we see on, what was that, the right labia majora?
Yes.
You think that's consistent with the resuscitative methods?
Well, she was wearing a pull-up that I saw when, you know, when she first was taken to the hospital. So how exactly where that came from? I mean, it's very odd. It's really relatively thin, narrow. I don't see any fingernail scrapes specifically that I can really pull out of this.
Well, let me ask you
Exactly what caused that, I can't tell you.
You can't tell us.
No.
Okay. Now you mentioned an important point. She was wearing a pull-up, correct?
Yes.
To your understanding, the child was wearing the diaper or pull-up throughout the entire incident.
Yes, I believe so.
So in a pull-up or a diaper has some padding to it, correct?
Yes.
That's the whole purpose of it.
Yes.
All right. And the padding would probably decrease the likelihood that you would see any kind of injury.
Hopefully, possibly, it certainly could, depending on what one was doing and how one was doing it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If you see a area of the body that is a protected area that is injured, would that cause you concern?
In and of itself alone, I mean, I think that conclusion is not unreasonable, at least as a place to start, you know, until one has history, circumstances, other things like that. But just looking at the injuries alone, then I think that's not unreasonable, because that is at least as a place to start.
Okay. And but would you agree with me that people generally bruise, children, when they fall, generally bruise kind of the bony prominences, like their elbow, their knee, things that kind of jut out?
Well, yes, and when they fall, like you're describing, the most common places are again the bony protuberances, elbow, shin, chin, you know, forehead, things like that. Just because that's I would say the typical appearance of most usual childhood injuries.
Okay. Now, you talked to Ms. Mull a little bit about this particular injury on Millie, correct?
Yes.
And is it odd to you that you don't see any injury over the elbow?
Oh, was it odd to me?
Yes.
Not particularly. I mean, if what she had described, say, was running and playing and falling on her elbow, well, then that I would expect to see, you know, if that was the information she gave, I would expect to see, say, some sort of contusion here and not here. I mean,
Is this the first time that you testified in an abdominal trauma case?
no, I'm sure I've testified in others.
And have you also testified regarding?
So this is where he is going to get into impeaching this witness. Everything else was just trying to discredit his testimony. Now he's going to actually impeach Kris Sperry.
Regarding, say, elbow injuries versus the fleshy parts of the body.
I don't know. I don't know if I don't have any recollection one way or the other.
Do you recall testifying in Newton County in 2014 in the case of State of Georgia versus Cornelius, Demetra, Richardson, Bethea?
No.
And you were actually the medical examiner on that particular case. You were still with the GBI then.
Okay.
Do you recall testifying that it was odd to you that you did not see any injury on the elbow itself? In fact, you only saw it on the fleshy part, and that to you what stood out as being extremely odd?
Well, I mean, you're taking something out of context. I don't remember anything about the autopsy or the case or the situation or whether any explanation had been. Pardon me, sir. Thank you.
Ma'am, can you please take her attention? Unfortunately, ma'am, we can't have you stay. That's a little bit too distracting. All right, let's proceed.
Thank you, Judge. And if you need to see the transcript, I can of course let you see it. Okay.
Well, sure. I don't remember anything about the case. I mean, there's, you know, well, that's all I can tell you. I mean, if you even have the report, perhaps I could tell you, excuse me, you know, why I said what I said or what the opinions were, the basis for those opinions. But, you know, in a vacuum, I don't know that I can answer what you're asking.
Okay. Well, let me see if this is something you still stand by. You said you can see the elbow, the point of the elbow right there, and that notably there's no bruising on that. The bruising is all over the soft tissue in the skin and the fat underneath there, but there's nothing on the elbow itself. And that location is not the location I would see a bruising. Bruising if someone, say, were to fall and hit their elbow. That's what people do if they can control their fall at all, is to put their arm out and to land on their elbow. That is a distinctly separate injury that did not come from a fall.
Okay, well, from what you're reading, it sounds reasonable. Again, I recall nothing about the case or the context or why even that question was asked to me, or if there had ever been any, any explanation attempted to be given as to how that bruise was there. So, as I think you can see, well, injuries may speak for themselves, but context is just as important as the injuries themselves many times.
So you think that the merely falling off a bar and hitting like this would cause that injury?
I don't have a problem with it, and as I recall, that is how she herself said that it had injuries are there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think an undetermined is a reasonable conclusion at the end of the day.
And that undetermined is based upon the information that you received from Ms. Rosenbaum, correct?
Well, yes, pulling back from just calling it flat-out homicide and expressing that there is doubt that exists, scientific and medical doubt that these are homicidally inflicted injuries.
So as you sit here today, you would say the cause of death was undetermined.
No, the manner of death.
The manner of death, I'm sorry.
If left up to me, if this were my case, I think that I probably would call the death an undetermined, only to convey that there's a difference between having doubts and being, say, 100% certain one way or the other.
Dr. Sperry, you and I spoke 11 days ago, correct?
I think so, yes.
And when we spoke, I asked you that same question, correct? How you classify.
It's been long ago and far away. My wife has had knee surgery. There's been an awful lot of water under the bridge. I recall the conversation. So go ahead.
And when we had that conversation, you said, that's an interesting question, but I think I would rule it an accident.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could see that. So you asked, and I think I told you at the time that no one ever had asked me that at all, up till that time. And so, it's making a decision on the fly. I don't know. I mean, undetermined is not unreasonable, although reaching a conclusion that it's more probably than not an accident, I think is also reasonable. So I'm not the one who was charged with signing the death certificate.
Correct. Dr. Darisaw was.
Well, the coroner was, I think, ultimately, but Dr. Darisaw, I think, reached a manner of death conclusion that that certainly should be in her report. Yes. So, and she's entitled to that opinion. Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the other work that you've done.
Okay, so right here, basically he is going to impeach him again. And I wanted that last little part in there because that was his official statement on the stand saying that he disagrees with the cause and manner of death, which, like in Alexee's case, would be the entrapment and homicide. So this, this expert, Kris Sperry, in this case, denied the findings of the medical examiners. If you didn't pause and read or are unaware of why he was basically retired in embarrassment, not only was he spending a majority of his time taking personal cases in which he was making a crazy amount of money as an expert witness for cases like this to try and get, in my opinion, the desperately guilty out of trouble. He has been accused of using junk science and all kinds of things. So this next part, it'll be the last little clip I play, is him being impeached, Kris Sperry being impeached by the prosecutor once again because of his prior statements that he's made. And this is why it is very interesting that this is the guy that is picked to be the expert for Alexee's case. If they shopped for experts at all, they may have been told no by many people who looked at this autopsy, looked at the surrounding facts, and said, there is no way I can cause doubt on this autopsy and keep my professional reputation, okay? For lack of a better term, that's my opinion, but that is seemingly implied in my opinion through the fact that he has been accused by other attorneys that that have gone up against when Kris Sperry is used as an expert witness by using junk science. He has countered the points of people he hired as his own people at the medical examiner's office of Georgia. He was the head of the medical examiner's office, hired the team of medical examiners. They would rule on deaths in the community, and he would get hired privately by the person who did the murder or the killing or the homicide to defend them, and he would disregard and try and disprove his own employees. So that is the extent of what we're dealing with here. So this next part is ultimately satisfying. It'll be the last little part of him being impeached.
You prior to going to the GBI, you did some defense work then too, correct?
Yes, back in the 90s, primarily. Yes, early 90s.
Since 2015, when you retired, you have been doing a lot more private consultation. Would that be safe to say?
No, actually, a lot less, in general than what I used to, but I am doing some defense work.
Some defense work. And about how much did you earn in defense work last year?
Oh, last year in defense work? I mean, I don't know. I honestly really haven't thought about it from that perspective. Almost all the defense work that I do is what there is of it is for public defenders. I mean, budgets are limited. Not a lot, really. I don't know. I haven't thought about it a bit.
How about in 2017?
2017, less. I mean, this is the second trial I've been in, a criminal defense trial in 2017.
You don't just get paid though for trials, though, correct?
Oh no, I get paid, for my time in reviewing things, but usually that's much more really limited.
Do you recall testifying just last year that in 2017 you made over $200,000 doing private consultations?
Probably altogether. I mean, the vast majority of that would be civil work. Yes, but that doesn't surprise me.
How many cases do you think you consulted upon this year?
How many? I don't know. I get more calls than cases that I agreed to review. I mean, I've turned down 2 this week because I just, my time is much more valuable now than anything else. So I don't really know.
And you mentioned the conference that you're testifying at. That's the National Child Abuse Defense and Resource Center 20th Conference, correct?
Correct, yes.
Dr. Sperry, Ms. Mull mentioned to you earlier an article that came out in 2015. You're familiar with that article, correct?
It's been so long, I don't know what it is you're talking about. What article's that?
Well, the article that prompted you to resign early from the GBI. Do you remember that?
I never resigned. I retired.
The one that caused you to retire early from the GBI.
Well, it allowed me to reach a decision that it was time for me to retire. Yes.
The article came out on a Monday and you retired by the end of the week.
Yes.
And in that, they also chronicled several cases in which you testified in which your credibility was called into issue.
Well, everything about credibility being called into issue, was stemmed from 2 lawyers in New Orleans who were irritated at me. That's where all those quotes that I'm aware of came from. So I don't know anything else or anyone else that called anything into question.
Okay. Well, they didn't just talk about a case in New Orleans. They talked about a whole bunch of cases across the country, correct?
Well, the reporter himself who put this together read through depositions and transcripts, and whatever conclusions he came up with, that was his basis. There was no one else that I'm aware of that decided to call anything into question.
All right. Well, let's talk about some of those. Isn't it true that you did a private consultation on a case involving a Thomas Duncan, which was a prisoner in custody case down in Ocala, Florida?
I don't recall any of that.
In that particular case, you were hired by the sheriff's department.
Okay, I recall nothing about it.
In that particular case, you found in favor of the sheriff's department or the sheriff's deputies.
Everything that you're telling me, I have no recollection whatsoever. I'm sorry, but I have no idea what you're talking about.
When the AJC article came out, you prepared a memo to the GBI, did you not?
Yes, for Director Keenan, yes.
And in that one, you did not deny that this had occurred?
Oh, deny that it occurred? No, I don't. Again, as far as the specifics and the nature of it, I'm sure I had some record that I had done something, but as far as what it was, who it was for, I mean, I don't know that I recall then, but it's been 4 years, so I don't recall it all now.
You were also contracted to work on a case out of Oklahoma, where it was another in-custody death, but in that case, you were hired by the family.
I don't know. What's the name of the case? I don't know.
Sure, Mary Giannetti.
Sorry. I mean, I vaguely remember the name, but beyond that, I don't know.
Would help refresh your recollection if you were to review Giannetti versus City of Stillwater?
Possibly. I don't know.
Lexington.
I don't know. I'm not reading through this. I really don't recall. I don't recall this a bit.
Well, the facts were very similar into how the deaths were occurred, but your opinion changed based upon who you were hired. Do you recall that?
No, the facts were very similar, so therefore my opinions changed. That's weird. So no, I mean, this whatever this document is that you're showing, I've never seen or even knew existed. I vaguely remember this. Yeah, it was decided February of 2006, so that's been 13 years ago. No, I'm not surprised. I have no recollection. Sorry.
Do you recall the situation where you were hired by a doctor in Ohio to provide expert testimony at his hearing when they were attempting to suspend his medical license?
Yes, I do recall that. Yes, that was an Ohio Medical Board opinion. Yes.
And the reason that they were attempting to suspend his medical license is because he had written a letter stating that an elderly person who was legally blind was fine to fly an airplane.
I think generally, yes, he had, my recollection is that the doctor had passed or allowed this individual, basically to keep his medical license, or excuse me, his pilot's license, not medical license, yes.
And what happened was that he then flew a plane and it crashed with 5 people in it.
Correct, and everyone died.
Correct. And you stated that it was a bad heart, not his vision, that incapacitated the pilot.
Well, yes, it was a causation issue for me that based upon the autopsy and also the scene investigation, the circumstances that, in my opinion, that it was not a vision issue, it was his heart issue that really caused the accident to occur.
And you based that upon a cardiac emergency while operating the plane because the seat was reclined upon impact. The individual in the passenger seat had knowledge of aircraft operation and the individual behind the pilot had the operation manual in his lap. That's what you based your opinion on. Does that sound familiar?
I recall somewhat about it, yes.
And you admitted on cross-examination that you had absolutely no experience in accident reconstruction.
Correct, not an accident reconstruction, no.
That items could have been dislodged upon impact, including the operations manual.
That was possible. I think that's what little I recall of it.
You had no knowledge concerning the pilot's seat model and how much the seat could endure upon impact.
Correct.
So you were basing your testimony based upon things that you had no experience in.
Well, no, I was basing it upon the circumstances. I mean, what was documented after the plane crashed and what was found, at the scene.
And the hearing examiner, based upon your testimony on cross-examination, did not find your testimony. I can move on. Let's do that. Let's talk about your time at the GBI.
Okay.
When you were GBI from 1997 to 2015, correct?
Yes.
When you left, your salary was $186,000.
Somewhere in there, probably.
And while you were at GBI, you would take both civil and you would also take some criminal non-defense, correct?
Rare ones, yes. When I was called, yes.
And do you recall stating last year in a trial that you would earn, essentially you would double your salary each year by doing private cases?
Yes, that's reasonable. I mean, that's at least for the amount of income I made as a private consultant was about equivalent to my salary, yes.
Okay. And between 2010 and 2014, you performed 208 full-time autopsies at the GBI. Does that sound correct?
I don't know. That's not something I kept track of. I mean, you could easily get it. I'm sure you did by asking, going through open records of the GBI.
And you also, but you did, you accepted 158 private cases for outside review.
Again, I can't tell you, that I did or not.
Between 2010 and 2014, there were at least 67 days that you reported working for at least 8 hours for the state. Is that correct? Where you were elsewhere?
Well, again, I don't know. I think that's what if I recall, that's what the reporter alleged, that there were errors, there were mistakes in there.
13 of those days, you were actually out of state. They were able to independently verify that you weren't even in the state, but you said that you said according to your time log that you were.
Okay. I mean, again, I don't know I don't know the basis for all that.
As a result of that, when you retired early, you had to forfeit, what is it, about 5.5 months worth of accrued time?
No, I think it was 200 and some odd hours, I don't know, of what's it called, forfeited leave. I mean, it was leave that was banked away that had no cash value that would only be applied to my retirement. So that was what decision, Mr. Keenan, who was the director at the time, that's what he and I arrived at for the mistakes I'd made.
For mistakes you made
Yes.
when you left that week?
Well, the mistakes I'd made, and after I looked at it, and I had already decided to retire in 2016, and honestly, I saw no reason to wait. There was nothing that I served to gain and nothing else that I would achieve by staying any longer.
Now, as a government employee, when you sign your time card, you were actually certifying that it's a true and correct statement, correct?
Well, that's what it said. Yes, that's what at least the attempt was made.
And at the bottom of each, it says that a violation of this, you are certifying the accuracy of the record to the best of your knowledge under penalty of law for knowing the statement of the record pursuant to OCGA 1610-8, correct?
Well, that's what it says anyway. Yes.
Okay. And you admit that the information that you put on there was false.
I admit that I made mistakes, and certainly, I suppose as I don't know who it is you work for, but intentionally falsifying timesheets is sort of the stupid road to hell. I made errors, and I certainly acknowledge those.
As a government employee, it's not just an inconvenience; it's a felony.
I don't know. Okay. Okay.
I can. All right, Marcus Estates. Marcus Estates 480. Did you have a chance to read it, Kris Sperry?
I did.
And you agree with me it's a felony?
Well, that's in accordance with what that says, and if it's, I don't know. Not being a lawyer, I don't know what decisions are made or how they're made or what decisions are made in order to pursue that. But there certainly was nothing that was done with respect to me no investigation. There was, the only thing I was ever asked to provide was the memorandum that you mentioned that I gave to Director Keenan. So that was the end of it.
All right. That wasn't the first time that you had some issues. Do you recall back in 2009 when Fox 5 did an investigation regarding violations of your outside employment agreement?
Yes, yes, I do recall that. That also was at the instigation of another attorney who had gotten very irritated with my opinions. So,
Almost done, Kris Sperry. Do you recall giving an interview to the Augusta Chronicle in June of 2015 regarding Dr. Darrisaw?
not offhand. I don't know whether I'm just trying to think what this. When was that?
June 20th of 2015. That would have been 5 months to the day before she conducted the autopsy on Layla Daniel.
I must have. I'm just trying to think. Why I was over in Augusta, unless this was all I recall is perhaps a meeting where I went with Director Keenan over there, because at that point, they wanted their medical examiner's office reopened. I think that was the real issue at the time.
It was about the fellowship program that you gave this particular interview.
Well, yes, that was, we're trying to pursue the development of a fellowship with what was the Medical College of Georgia. I think that they call themselves something else now.
In regard to Dr. Darrisaw, do you recall saying, quote, she's probably now better than I am as being the most experienced in child abuse cases in the state?
I don't recall doing that, but that doesn't surprise me.
Nothing further.
Thank you. And
Okay, so that is basically the legal equivalent of getting your butt kicked. You lost the fight. That was not good. He did very, very, very bad on the stand. And from looking into the rules in New Mexico, I do not see any reason why Kris Sperry's prior work as an expert testimony witness for these types of medical issues won't be relevant and won't be allowed to be entered by the state. So the state will likely be able to talk about how he retired in embarrassment, bring up other cases if they have the ability to look into them as in depth as this prosecutor did, because he has worked on a lot of child abuse cases, to maybe find one where the child was entrapped in a bag or lack of oxygen was part of the cause of death, and then be able to impeach his statements as per the autopsy towards baby Alex, because he is obviously going to be trying to disprove it. And I would almost bet anything that he has discussed a entrapped child autopsy at some point throughout the hundreds and hundreds of cases that he's done, either as the head examiner of Georgia, the head medical examiner in Georgia, or as a private expert witness. So my next thing is going to be trying to get a hold of a list of his cases, see if we can go through and find anything where he has talked about that. And we can hope that the state is also doing that, because he's going to be very easy to discredit, in my opinion. He has a few statements there at the end that really stood out to me as almost argumentative, when he said, I didn't resign, I retired. The fact that he really wanted to make a point about that. And when he kept saying, I have no knowledge of anything you're talking about, when some of it was only 4 years ago, some of it was 14 days ago. He just does not want to admit to anything. And also, very interestingly, when asked how much he made, he didn't answer. He doesn't want to be on record knowing how much he made, maybe for tax issues, who knows? That's just my speculation. Obviously, he knows that the prosecutor can't get his business's tax records, so maybe he did not want to confirm that for some reason. I don't know, but he definitely didn't want to confirm that. So there are a lot of pressure points that the state can put on this guy. And hopefully, through the little bits that I have clipped out from this for you, from his direct examination and then his cross-examination, I tried to let that play out a little bit more. But hopefully you can see that this guy is not worth the money. I'm estimating anywhere from $8,000 to $16,000, maybe $17,000 for his testimony, depending on how long they keep him on the stand. Seems to be about his rate. From the research that I've done, I'm fairly certain he will be coming to testify in person, so they will be paying for him to travel all the way to New Mexico for this. So yeah, he is costing a pretty penny, and interesting if they have the money to put up for someone to be an expert witness. Why not get someone who didn't retire in embarrassment? Maybe because the autopsy is going to hold up and no other expert medical examiner witnesses wanted to risk their reputations, so to speak, to, try and argue for Alexee in this case, it should give us some more hope towards a guilty verdict. But please let me know down below if you believe him, if you feel like he's going to be believable, if you would hire him or just go without a expert witness, if you think he is even that detrimental to the case. But as far as the expert witness, since we just checked out the autopsy in the last video, this is a guy disproving all of the little bits and pieces that we found, proving that baby Alex was alive. Other than Rosa and Devin, he's probably the third most interesting witness that I am excited to see in that trial. I don't really care too much about Devin's mom and some of the other witnesses, whatever, but he is going to be just, I don't know. I just have a feeling there will be fireworks. So let me know how you feel about this guy down below. And also let me know if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And I do genuinely enjoy the conversation. If you're interested in following this case all the way to trial, please subscribe, as I'll be covering it all along the way with a legal focus. It's your girl Friday. I'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye.